Welcome back, honeys, to your weekly recaps of art news from around the world considered notable by yours truly. This is the Beesness. We're going to begin our episode today with an ever so slight correction from our 5-minute musical. I misspoke when I said that Beyonce smashed an MTV camera. I goofed my acronyms there. It was a VMA's camera. I also wanted to take a moment to celebrate and acknowledge, actually within one of these episodes, that we've recently become affiliate partners with RSS.com, our hosting platform. For those who may not know, a hosting platform is essentially the intermediary that you upload as a podcaster all of your content to, your episode covers, the audio itself, whatever, and then they publish it on your behalf to the providers, the streamers like Apple Music, Spotify, so on. This is our first partnership for Highbrow Honey, and to have it come from a platform that already kind of literally supports what we do is so amazing, feels so validating, and we're just happy to make that announcement. If you're at all curious about RSS as a business or wanting to learn more potentially about starting your own podcast, we'll drop the link for that right in our episode description as well. And now, honeys, on to the good stuff, your headlines. Starting with some updates on previous stories, Khaled Sabsabi was reinstated as Australia's Venice Biennale artist, following an independent external review by the governance advisory firm Blackhall and Pearl of Creative Australia's decision to drop the Lebanese conceptual artist and curator of the Australian Pavilion, Michael D'Agostino, just a week after their appointments to the roles earlier this year. As we'd previously covered, some of Creative Australia's staff resigned from their posts in solidarity with the artist and curator. Statements as well as open letters of support for both were signed by former representatives, curators, and others associated with Creative Australia itself or the Australian art scene at large. Creative Australia initially doubled down on this decision and even floated the idea of leaving the pavilion empty in 2026, but according to The Guardian, this review found that no one individual at Creative Australia was at fault, but that the organization was likely not prepared for a, quote, potentially divisive controversy, end quote, such as this. Writes one of our sources, Hyperallergic, quote, there is an unfortunate irony in that many of the flaws in the Biennale selection process stemmed from a strong desire within Creative Australia to keep decisions on artistic merit free from non-artistic considerations, end quote. And that does seem to be the unfortunate irony here. Creative Australia drummed up more controversy by this firing and rehiring than it would have to just keep them all along, especially because, as Arts News points out, the move was widely condemned by critics as a, quote, politically motivated act of censorship, end quote. We at Highbrow Honey are happy that they're getting their opportunities back, and obviously both of them are happy about this as well. In a July 2nd statement, the pair said that the, quote, solidarity, belief, and encouragement of the Australian and international creative community sustained us throughout this difficult time, making it possible for us to continue our work and remain in a position to accept this recommission, end quote. Also worth celebrating from the last week, New York City has saved jobs at the Brooklyn Museum by allocating $2.5 million for it to, quote, maintain current staffing levels, develop a robust philanthropic pipeline, and create a sustainable plan for the future, end quote, under the city's $115.9 total US billion-dollar budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The city council voted unanimously to pass the 2026 fiscal year budget on June 30th, and Brooklyn Museum will not be moving forward with the layoffs of over a dozen workers as a result. Under its February plans to cut more than 10% of its staff, that was met with backlash from its unions and community supporters. One of the things to catch our attention here is that our sources say sustained campaigns and local government advocacy by unions and lay people alike helped the Brooklyn Museum secure the necessary funds to avoid further staff cuts, even as others like the Guggenheim Museum announced non-negotiable layoffs. All the same, director Ann Pasternak warned that the museum will need to, quote, exercise significant fiscal discipline, end quote, in the coming year, and there were still some permanent job losses here. 5 non-union staff were laid off and some accepted voluntary buyouts over the last few months. None of them will be rehired just because there is new funding. Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill passed both the House and Senate last week, and with it, on page 820, a $40 million allocation for statues at the forthcoming National Garden of Heroes. The bill confirmed that those funds will remain available to the National Endowment for the Humanities for the fiscal year 2025 through the fiscal year 2028 under Executive Orders number 13934, number 13978, 14188 and number 14189. The total budgets for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowments for the Humanities for fiscal year 2025 was $210.1 million and $200.1 million, respectively. As we covered in April when this headline broke, the upcoming garden will feature life-size statues of, quote, 250 great individuals from America's past who have contributed to our cultural, scientific, economic, and political heritage, unquote, and it will be funded by federal grants that were distributed to arts and culture groups across the U.S. and later canceled by the Trump administration. Our sources pointed out that legislation has been criticized for, among other things, its, quote, disproportionate tax benefits for the richest Americans, large cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, $45 billion in increased funding for immigration and customs enforcement, changes to clean energy tax credits, gutting the Internal Revenue Service, and other policy changes, unquote, that according to the Congressional Budget Office would add $3.3 trillion to the deficit over a decade. In other news, Heather Gerken was named the president of the Ford Foundation, which is one of the U.S.'s largest and most prominent philanthropic organizations with an endowment of about $16 billion and a major supporter of a lot of arts ventures. The soon-to-be former dean of Yale Law School and a nationally recognized expert on constitutional law and democracy will be taking the place of Darren Walker, who left after 12 years last fall to step into his new role as president of the National Gallery of Art in D.C. Artforum writes that the foundation is likely hoping she will bring her approach to inclusivity into this role. As they point out, quote, she has increased the school's enrollment of veterans and established a program covering tuition for low-income students at the school, end quote. We also heard that Nigeria's Museum of West African Art will officially welcome the public to parts of its Benin City campus on November 11th. The institution has been in progress since 2020, and the rest will open in 2028. The first ever displays of the museum's historic collections will include works never before shown in Nigeria, which will be alongside a range of programming like talks, film screenings, etc., and a show called Nigeria Imaginary Homecoming, a new iteration of the widely praised Nigerian pavilion from the 2024 Venice Biennale. The Institute's facilities for conservation, research, and archaeological endeavors will open the same day. The Institute's director, Ore Disu, stated, quote, globally, museums are increasingly being asked to justify their existence, whether it's by way of funding cuts, restitution, or falling visitor numbers. What's important for us at MOA is to be truly embedded in building contextually relevant practices, regenerating African sites and scholarships, and using art as a catalyst for real impact. We are proud to continue to show that Africa can provide new ways of thinking and doing as we open our doors this November, end quote. We also learned that 4 bronze discs depicting lions' heads in high relief, each with slightly different features and expressions, were found in a 1900-year-old Roman archaeological site known as Khirbat Ibrica, located about 10 miles northeast of Tel Aviv. They were uncovered within a space shared by 8 Roman cist graves, aka burial chambers lined with stones, dated to the 1st or 2nd centuries CE. What was so fascinating about this headline is that there has not been any trace of Roman settlement discovered at the archaeological site since its first excavation in 1995, say our sources, who also report, quote, the researchers aren't sure about the newly discovered lions' head's significance, end quote. Although similarly shaped door knockers have been discovered, these are not shaped correctly for that purpose. They couldn't have been rigging for the coffin lowering process because they were stacked next to the grave, so maybe they denote that this was a special or high-ranking person, but researchers just don't know. We're curious to find out. Another discovery, hundreds of ancient ceramic artifacts were found during the excavation of a preserved shipwreck in Turkey. The wreck was found off the coast of Adrasan and included ceramic plates, trays, bowls, etc. dated back to the late Hellenistic or early Roman period, or as the Minister of Culture and Tourism, Mehmet Nuri Orsoy, said after diving to visit the underwater archaeological site himself, quote, the cargo ship dated back approximately 2,000 years. The ceramic artifacts were plastered with raw clay and placed one inside the other in order to protect them during transportation, a storage method which helped extraordinarily preserve the original colors, patterns, and surface features on the almost intact ceramics, end quote. And that's one of our Why We Cares. The site's high preservation level provides really valuable data on both past production as well as packaging techniques. And how freaking cool that he went down there himself. Other Why We Cares, Hakan Onitz, associate professor at Akdeniz University who led the excavation, confirmed a section will be open to diving tourism after the excavation of the shipwrecks is completed. Ursoy also announced a dedicated section on underwater archaeology at the Antalya Archaeology Archaeology Museum, plus the construction of a new museum focused on underwater archaeology beginning this month in the Kemer Idros region, the future site of the exhibition for these ceramic artifacts. One more notable discovery from this week: fishermen in the Brazilian Amazon uncovered enormous funerary urns beneath a toppled tree. Found on an artificial island known as Lago do Cochia, these 7 oversized ceramic urns were created by local pre-Columbian inhabitants, and some of them contained bones from humans, fish, frogs, and turtles. The largest measures nearly 3 feet in diameter and weighs around 770 pounds. Brazil's Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation confirmed they were likely used for funerary practices associated with rituals and with food. On top of the size of the urns, this find is also interesting because the Lago site is one of at least 70 built by indigenous people in flood-prone areas along the Amazon River approximately 2,000 years ago. They used a mix of earth and broken ceramics to build up and engineer their landscape and engage in social activities even during seasonal floods. So this is a very culturally significant site. Furthermore, National Geographic's Maggie Rodriguez reports that the containers' form and decorations don't clearly match any of the established Amazonian ceramic traditions, for example, the polychrome or the borda incisa. This is an unprecedented find, therefore. Our sources write, quote, "The vessels are now undergoing analysis at the IDSM's lab in Tefe. The researchers hope that further study will reveal more about the people who created the urns and the worldview reflected in their burial practices," end quote. We also learned that British pop artist Peter Phillips passed away on June 23rd at age 86, as confirmed by his family in an online statement. The family aims to establish a Peter Phillips Foundation, an initiative intending to offer grants and residency programs in his honor. Also last week, the Louvre opened its International Architectural Competition on June 27th as a key part of its massive 5-year, $1,306 million renovation plan. The winner of this design competition will design a new Mona Lisa exhibition space, plus a new entrance on the building's eastern facade. The 5 finalists will be decided by a 21-person jury in October before the overall winner is announced early next year. A report from Le Monde, translated by the New York Times, says that Louvre director Lawrence Descartes has called for the new entrance to merge with the surrounding 17th century architecture, not Pei's glass pyramid. This announcement comes, however, during a period of heightened concern for the institution's future following issues with the building's aging infrastructure, the unannounced staff strike we covered, and a €10 ticket fee for non-EU visitors, which was recently announced. As of last week, donors are protesting Albright College's move to sell its art collection to cut a $20 million deficit. The liberal arts institution in Reading, Pennsylvania is following in the footsteps of the Fisk University, Brandeis University, Valparaiso University, Randolph College, Rockford College, and Mills College by putting up 500 works for online sale. This includes works by notables like Bridget Riley, Jasper Johns, Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, while books and posters will also be sold. This plan has sparked pushback among community members and students alike, and according to a letter sent by one donor's 3 daughters to the college's legal counsel, a woman named Courtney Schultz, quote, "Albright's decision to monetize the art collection of the Friedman Gallery is both short-sighted and counterproductive. The sale of these treasures can do nothing meaningful to mitigate Albright's $20 million debt," end quote. We care about this headline because of the long list of colleges I named in the intro there, and this trend of balancing budgets by selling art could be a good or a bad thing. In my personal opinion, it should be the last option, not a convenient one, and in this case, it does feel like a convenient choice. Our sources say that the sale of the works will not probably make much difference given its current state. The school has laid off over 50 salaried staffers, or about 20% of the college's total workforce already. Another indicative fact: James Gaddy, the vice president for administration at Albright and a self-proclaimed quote-unquote turnaround specialist, told the art newspaper that the college's quote 2,300-strong art collection was not core to our mission to educate and cost more to keep than the value of the art, end quote. We're noticing, honeys, that the Pennsylvania arts are not doing too hot. At least 10 Pennsylvania institutions have closed over the last decade due to fiscal crises, such as the Rosemont College, the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh Technical College, with 126 more educational institutions being forced to merge to survive since 2016. Elio Menezes was also fired from his director role at Sao Paulo's Museu Afro-Brazil. The institution, founded by sculptor Emanuel Araujo, is known for its crucial support of the sort of Afro-Brazilian artists who have not been given their due by mainstream institutions in the country, and it appointed Menezes in March 2024 at age 21. Menezes himself announced he'd been dismissed from his post on Instagram last week, as well as that board members Wellington Souza and the artist Rosanna Paulino had left their posts. In it, he condemned what he described as, quote, decision-making structures shaped by informality, personalism, and a lack of transparency, structures still predominantly composed of individuals disconnected from the diversity and Black leadership that the museum represents or should represent, and lacking engagement with the world of visual arts, end quote, though he didn't respond to requests by our sources for further comment. The museum told Folha de Sao Paulo that his dismissal came amid issues reaching an agreement with Beesness that, quote, balanced the expectations of the then director with the budgetary limits, end quote, and criticized his personal attacks on the board of directors as chair. An unfortunately ugly departure for him. In happier news, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston has restituted 2 more gifted artifacts to the Kingdom of Benin. The objects in question, held by the MFAB for 12 years, were a terracotta and iron commemorative head from the 16th or 17th century and a 16th century bronze relief plaque showing 2 officials with raised swords. We featured this story because it is almost a follow-up. The museum had previously acknowledged that many items from the same collection, the Lemon collection, acquired, quote, through purchase at public auction and from dealers, can be traced to the British attack on and looting of the Kingdom of Benin in 1897, end quote, when it closed its Benin Kingdom Gallery in April, as we reported on at the time. Last week also saw Canaletto's auction record smashed by the sale of one of his Venetian views for $43.7 million. The work beat Canaletto's previous auction, established in 2005, for $24.6 million. With this work in question, Venice the return of the Bucentoro on Ascension Day, circa 1732. Despite once having been owned by UK's first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole, this work only had a $27.5 million estimate and has been auctioned just twice before. The work has only been auctioned twice prior to this, once in 1751, and then again in 1993, when the consignor acquired it for $10.2 million, and it became, at the time, the most expensive Old Masters painting ever sold in France. Another report from last week announced that Canadian art schools have seen growth in interest, applications, and enrollment from the U.S. Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax is among several to tell Art News recently that it has seen significantly greater interest, applications, acceptances, all that this year from students living in the USA as the Trump administration rolls out several new policies for international students, including, quote, threatening to block Harvard University from enrolling international students, announcing it would aggressively begin to revoke the visas of Chinese students, and adding social media account reviews to students' and scholars' visa applications, end quote. More specifically, report our sources, those applicants are expanding in geographical area from the typical northeastern basis to attend Canadian universities to the entirety of the U.S., and overall, these numbers are just higher. They include a, quote, 220% spike in U.S. applicants to Nova Scotia College of Art and Design's undergraduate programs for fall 2025, a 180% rise in acceptances, and a 66% increase in students responding to those offers, end quote. According to a Reuters report published April 15th, the numbers from the Nova Scotia College align with what other Canadian universities are experiencing with U.S.-based students, those like the University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, and University of Waterloo. The Alberta University of the Arts reported its website traffic from U.S.-based IP addresses was more than double between January and April of this year than what it was in the same period last year. Nova Scotia President Jana Masalik stated that student feedback has made it clear they're doing so, quote, because of trans experiences, disability, same-sex marriage, women's rights, all those kinds of components of their freedom in the U.S. being a concern for these students. The sort of fear of persecution in the U.S. is making them want to go elsewhere, look elsewhere definitely if they're international students, but even from the U.S. students, end quote. She went on to say that their parents, quote, want their children to come to a school that is going to be accommodating, supportive, and sort of expressive in a manner that is supporting those students' interests in the arts, end quote. The headline caught our attention, honeys, because this could be a major problem down the line. It could be almost a warning sign for brain drain. Ultimately, a switch up from the high rate of international student enrollment at the U.S. art schools in the last 20-ish years would noticeably change the student body of many institutions like the Savannah College of Art and Design or the School of Visual Arts. Though the problem is not severe nor immediate, as Alberta University Arts Dean of Students Dr. Pablo Ortiz Hernandez explains, some schools like his did not hit their international student caps last year because of new federal Canadian rules reducing the maximum number of international student permits by 35%, which had scared off some of those students from applying, and produced what he had called, quote, a chilling effect on prospective applicants in other countries who have interpreted them as a sea change in the way Canada views foreign students, end quote. But the dean does not expect that to continue to be the case with Canadian schools turning their recruitment efforts to stateside campaigns. And last but not least, last week, Lorde shocked fans with a nude vulva photo inside her album cover. The newly dropped LP includes a seated shot of the New Zealand singer's entire body with her vulva somewhat visible between her splayed legs, captured through a pair of unzipped clear pants. Behind the image was American photographer Talia Chetrit, known for her intimate and sometimes erotic shots which challenge self-objectification. Chetrit has said that the explorations of power dynamics and sexuality are foundational to her work, and that's mostly where the public conversation has stayed on this photograph. It notably received far less criticism than Sabrina Carpenter's new album cover in terms of whether or not the image feeds into the male gaze or misogyny. Vogue, for example, questioned whether the image could be a political commentary on a transphobic obsession with genitalia as the defining characteristic of gender, which is a pretty compelling interpretation considering recent anti-trans rulings in both the UK and the United States. That's all we've got for you this week, honeys. Be sure to tune in again soon to continue to catch news updates and other art historical entertainment. Make sure you're getting outside, enjoying some of that natural vitamin D, and hydrating or dehydrating, taking care of yourselves, all that good stuff. We'll talk again very soon. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugno. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.